Welcome to this website. This is an introduction to allow students to explore Martin Bernal's thesis in his three-volume study called Black Athena, the Afro-Asiatic Roots of Civilization, Classical Civilization. By the end of this project, students will work through a workshop and be able to begin their own paper or develop a blog of their own commentary on the Black Athena thesis and its continuing relevance and controversy. Students are asked to defend or refute the thesis and to cite evidence or scholarship that supports their thesis, either from Bernal or other scholars. Succinctly, Bernal's thesis or central argument is rather straightforward and comprised of three main ideas. First, ancient Egyptian civilization should be regarded as fundamentally an African civilization. Second, ancient Egyptian and Semitic-speaking Southwest Asia, the Levant, Near East, exerted influence and direct contact and fundamental roles in the formation of ancient Greece. And third, the Greeks and the wider Mediterranean populations of the second millennium BCE underwent considerable mixing of migrations and linguistic influences that resulted in ancient Egyptian and Semitic peoples and languages adding to an already developed Greek and Indo-European culture. So, students will be able to examine representative elements and primary sources in historical texts and objects and other evidence from linguistics and archaeology and prepare a paper about this on the website. If you look at the final tab or the last blog page, I've explained a little bit how we'll do this. We'll have some sections in computer lab and practice looking at online sources and discuss sources and images and articles that we find. And you'll be able to develop this over a couple of phases. I want you to turn in a draft by the fourth week, and I'll return that draft, and then you'll basically expand your essay and turn it in by the seventh week. Well, just briefly, who was Black Athena? Why is this project called Black Athena? Well, why did Bernal name his three-volume study Black Athena? And who was Athena? And why is she black, or was she even black? And these are interesting questions. Why this title of the book? Well, Bernal, in titling his book, purposely chose a title that raised a metaphor of the Greek goddess Athena to reflect the broader subject of his major study, which is the book's subtitle, The Afro-Asiatic Roots of Classical Civilization. That subtitle is really the key thesis or theme of the book series, which has now extended to 3 volumes. But who was Athena, and why is she relevant to tracing the Afro-Asiatic roots of classical civilization? Well, in the Greek pantheon of gods and goddesses, and here you might read Hesiod's classic work, Theogony, which is kind of a litany of the gods and their origins, written in classical Greece. We have in this Greek pantheon of multiple gods and goddesses, there are 2 major cults of shrines, temples that appear throughout the Eastern Mediterranean by the second millennium BCE that were dedicated to Poseidon, the god of the sea, and Athena, who is this goddess of the land. Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, was associated with Seth, the Egyptian god of the sea or wilderness. Other peoples also observed closely related cults dedicated to Poseidon or other gods of the sea, including the Hyksos peoples, the Semitic peoples, known as Yam or sea people, and Yahweh. They had these terms for gods associated with the sea. See, Bernal, in his first volume, page 21, deals with this. The Greek goddess Athena was similarly associated with the Egyptian goddess Nate and the Semitic god Anat, who was worshipped by the Hyksos peoples of the Eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia. Bernal states that the very name of the city of Athens in Greece and its Greek form, Athene Athena, originates from Egyptian. The goddess Athena, to whom Athens was named, is identified with the Egyptian goddess Nate. And he talks about how the Egyptian cult developed in Lower Egypt near the Mediterranean, in contact with seagoing peoples, and that the name of the house or temple of Hutnet, which means temple or house of Nate, was turned around and transcribed to become Athena instead of Hutnet. It was transcribed in Greek into this sound or spelling of Athena. So that's something of the phonetics and transmission of the name of the Greek goddess Athena, and he sees a direct correlation there. Now, this is a very controversial study. Many scholars think he's overreading, he's going too far. And we'll look at other blogs and discussion, the other pages I have here of scholars who are very critical of this thesis. And what's important is that in Volume 1, he gives a methodology of how scholars, what he calls the ancient Egyptian model, ancient model of knowledge of the Mediterranean, of Greek civilization, allowed for an explanation of Egyptian and Near Eastern origins, of names of gods, of other linguistic origins in Greek and concept, but that in more recent modern times, an Aryan model was somewhat very much European-centered, began to deny these contacts in the late 19th century and into the 20th century. And most scholars who deny these kind of contacts just are refusing to look at this earlier tradition. So Bernal proposes a revised ancient model, what he calls his own thesis that he explores in his last two volumes, in which he tries to show that substantial migrations from the north did occur. This is the Indo-Aryan invasions, but that substantial contact with Egypt and the Near East had great influence in the development of writing and development of alphabet systems, language, of cults, of beliefs, of ideology. This cannot be discounted, Bernal argues. Well, as you might imagine, this provoked a great deal of controversy, and a number of scholars reacted to it, including Mary Lefkowitz and others, that I have a blog page devoted to that. Stephen Howe is also very interesting. In Volume 2, that first book was published in 1987, and Volume 2 appeared in 1991, and the subtitle of that work is The Archaeological and Documentary Evidence, which tried to back up a lot of the political history of Egyptian aggressive colonization and empire building in the Eastern Mediterranean in the second millennium. Now, Bernal in this volume deals with a great deal of wide-sweeping issues and rivalries between Egyptian and Near Eastern and Mycenaean and Troy and other peoples in Asia Minor, including the Hittites, who were in a considerable rivalry with each other through their contact, their trade, or establishing an empire. In the midst of that, we have an environmental crisis, a major explosion of the volcano Athena, which is an island quite near Crete. And Bernal discusses how that volcanic eruption had an impact on Cretan civilization, which had been a meeting place between Egyptian, Near Eastern, and Mycenaean and Greek culture to the north. It disrupted the Cretan palace cultures and civilizations because of a sort of environmental problem in part of the island with all the ash, and seemed to have created a great deal of crisis for Cretans. We know that thereafter the Mycenaeans invaded Crete, and then we enter a phase of conflict and rivalry between Mycenaeans, Trojans, and Hittites, and according to Bernal, also possibly the Egyptians. Those are the period of the Trojan Wars. And Bernal dates the fall of Troy to about between 1215 and 1205. And that collapse of Troy is followed soon after by the collapse of Mycenae itself, probably the Hittites. And we see a reformation in the Eastern Aegean and the Mediterranean in the period thereafter. That's pretty well where Volume 2 ends in terms of chronology, with the end of the second millennium around 1100 BC. Finally, in the third volume, he turns to linguistic evidence. So that's a little introduction. I also have a tab about art. We'll look at some examples from art and how this works, and we'll guide you around. And in class, we'll look at examples, other examples as we proceed. Anyway, thank you, and that's the end of the introduction.